Have you ever wondered how Eric Johnson gets that violin-like lead tone? Well, today I'm building a Fuzz Face-inspired pedal designed to get that smooth, sweet sustain. Stick around to the end and I'll share with you all the tips and tricks that I've learned over the last 22 years being a chief engineer in the Royal Navy. If you're serious about your sound, please like and subscribe and catch more episodes just like this one. Here's everything I'm going to be using today to create the Eric Johnson Fuzz Face. It's going to be a variant of my Abbey Road fuzz pedal, so it's going to have some of the Abbey Road mods, and you'll notice that the transistors are missing from this whole thing, and that's because we're going to talk about them later, and I'm going to give you my opinion on which way to go with these transistors, because the results online, if you search it, aren't exactly consistent, and they kind of go in a different direction to what I think is going to be the way to go. So stay around to the end and you'll hear how I go about making this awesome pedal. Eric Johnson's lead tone is legendary. It's smooth, it's rich, it's incredibly dynamic. Please like this episode and subscribe. By doing so, it helps the algorithm understand that I bring value to you, and it'll help share my channel to more people, which means that I'll be able to show more people how to build awesome guitar effects pedals. Thank you. First up on the list is going to be a 22 microfarad, 22 UF cap. That is it's a polar cap, so it's orientated positive and negative. We've talked about that in the past. However, for my build, I'm going to use a 15 microfarad cap. I mean, you could go anywhere as low as 4 or 5 microfarads, and it will still do the job. The only thing it does is it very slightly affects the, well, this is a simplified thought, but it very slightly affects the bass of the pedal, the bass range. And so I like to just drop it down to 15 microfarads. To my ears, it sounds better, but you could go as low as 5 microfarads and it would still work. It'd still sound like a fuzz face, but it would it'd take a bit of the bass out, I think. Anyway, I'm using a non-polar cap because I've just got a load of these 15 microfarad Elner caps. I like them. They're non-polar. That's great, but if you're using a polar cap, remember this pedal is negative ground, same as any Boss pedal, same as regular pedals. So our negative will point towards the top left-hand tag, and our positive will point towards the bottom left-hand tag. Okay, so that be mindful of that, but you know, it's easy to find non-polar caps. Find one of these bad boys and you won't even have to think about it. As ever, this cap doesn't fit in the board straight away. So what I am going to do is I take my Nipex duckbill or flat nose pliers. I call them flat nose, but apparently in America some people call them duckbill pliers. So just for you guys, take them and I use it as a spacer and create this sort of shape. Regular viewers will be well versed in the way that I create that shape now. There we are. I do that on both sides, and all that does is allow me to use an excessively large component in this tag board that isn't that excessively large. And I know how much everyone loves me using big components on a small tag board to get in. I've got to say, recently I've had an absolute immense amount of people get in touch and say that they've started building guitar effects pedals from watching my videos. Loads of people getting in touch and asking where to get the tag board from. HiFiCollective.com if anyone's interested. No, .co.uk, apologies. HiFiCollective.co.uk. They're not an affiliate in any way from my show or what have you. I just love their website. I can lose hours on there. It's fantastic. Anyway, I get it from them. It's good stuff. But loads of people have got in touch saying that they've built their first pedals or they're planning a pedal build. I think it's amazing. I'd love to hear if anyone has built any of the pedals, especially from videos that I've done. And if you share them on social media, please tag me in them, because I'd love to share them to people myself. Right, we're only going to solder the bottom left-hand tag. I've just burnt myself touching that because it's still hot. Well done, Joe. We're only going to solder this bottom left-hand tag, even though if we look at our drawing, we can see that there's nothing else going into this top tag apart from our transistor, which we add later on. The reason being is I'm going to run a 1 meg resistor from this top left tag down to the second tag on the bottom, and the reason for that is it's going to be our anti-pop resistor. We've discussed this in the past. some DC will leak past our input cap and end up sat between our 3-pole double throw switch and the actual signal, the guitar signal. So when you step on a switch, you get that annoying pop that modern guitarists hate. I kind of love it because it makes me think that I've got a vintage pedal or whatever. It doesn't bother me at all. But then again, I don't play live or professionally, so there you go. So we'll add a 1 meg in there anyway. I'm going to go and dig one out because it appears that I missed it out of the box when I was selecting the components for this. So I'm going to go and dig something out cool. So here's our 1 meg resistor. You can barely see that. It's a little tiny carbon comp. Actually, this one isn't 1 meg. I'm lying here. So let's just prove that. If we take our Fluke 101, and remember guys and girls, if you want one of these Fluke 101 meters, please check out the link in the description and buy it through Amazon, because I get a little bit of a kickback with no extra charge to yourself. And I do spend all of that money on stuff to film videos with, which is fantastic. Like right now, I'm actually using a Saramonic, some sort of link thing, so I can play music from my captor when I'm testing a pedal and talk at the same time. Look at that, I'm moving into the 21st century. Right, so if we go round to ohms, we can see that it is a 1.3 meg resistor. Now you could go as high as like 2 or 3 meg. Really the idea is don't go below 1 meg, because that'll start to drag your signal down. But anything above that, and of course people with really acute hearing will be able to hear the impedance change on the input. So it is advisable to stick to 1 meg, but this thing's so small I had to use it. If we just get a regular resistor like this one, this is like a regular sized resistor, you know, not particularly big, not particularly small. Look how small that is compared to it. And the reason for that is, the reason why I chose this one, apart from the fact that it's a carbon comp and it's awesome, is because I'm using this input cap. This is a 1 microfarad Mullard Tropical Fish. These are, I mean, they're not super rare, but they're awesome. And the reason I'm using the Mullard is because after speaking to Chris from R2R Electric, he was saying that he didn't like the sound of these because they had like a top end sizzle. Well, I need that sizzle because our transistor choice is going to require it. Well, at least I think it will. I may fall flat on my face here, but I think we're going to need that, so this is what I'm using. There's our Elner cap, soldered both ends with our tiny little 1.3 meg resistor, anti-pop resistor now in place. I haven't soldered this end, and that is because our 1 microfarad or 1 UF cap is going to go in that hole there. This is our input cap. You could go as low as like 470 NF and it will still sound thick and fat and full, and that's what I normally do. But if we look at our schematic online of the Eric Johnson, sorry, not a schematic, what am I talking about? A layout from Mark of our Eric Johnson fuzz face. It has a 1 microfarad input cap, so I am gonna use the 1 microfarad just to see if there's anything to that. And again, we're gonna do the bendiness of the legs in the same manner that we did with our 15 microfarad, because this cap is way too big to go on this this tag board, which is why I like it. I don't know how many people read the comments on these YouTube videos, but I absolutely love going through them. I got one guy that tells me how terrible I am at soldering almost every video. Not every video, but in fact he's missed a few videos, so if he's watching this, please go back and comment on them too. That would be fantastic. But telling me, you know, why does this guy still solder in front of people he can't solder? Fantastic, love it. What's this? You're going to love this one because I'm soldering a really thick leg and a bit awkward. And we're only going to solder the input side for those who are watching to actually watch. So because it's a thick leg, I have cleaned the tip of my soldering iron with solder tip cleaner. Again, you can get that through the Amazon affiliates link in the description. And a bit of soldering technique just to show you how poor my soldering is. I like to wet the tip a little bit. Then I hold the tip on both the tag and the component, the wet side of the tip. However, because this component leg is really thick and there's no transistors in there or whatever that can burn out, I like to focus the heat mainly on the component, but some on the tag as well at the same time. if you touch them both together and then you just run your solder in until it encapsulates the whole thing, take your solder away, then take the iron away, and that's how I solder. And I get told almost every video how poor my soldering technique is, and I'm really glad that he thinks so, but this is what I do anyway, and I'm going to keep showing people how to solder this way. I mean, let's face it, it's worked for king / queen and country for the last 22 years, and there's been no complaints. The warships I've served on have certainly stayed on task and at sea due to some of my soldering skills, so I suppose that's good enough for me. Now there we go. That is our massive, I mean, look how big that is. It's ridiculous. I love it. Our massive tropical fish is now in place. I haven't soldered this top end because we're going to need our next resistor, which is this. Now on our drawing we can see that Eric Johnson used a 100k resistor, I believe. I'm going to put the drawing up on the screen now. I'll probably show that I'm wrong, but most fuzz faces use a 100k resistor in this part. What this resistor does is it controls the feedback. Well, not exactly, but sort of like the feedback loop from the output of your amp. The negative feedback comes back and makes the amp cleaner. Well, this kind of does the same thing. So it's 100k, but if you increase it to 110, it becomes more unruly and gainy and fuzzy. And if you drop it down to 91k like this, you're going to get less gain and less unruliness. And as this is a silicon fuzz face, but we want it to be that violin-like Eric Johnson tone, I mean, for lack of tone descriptor words, it's going to be beneficial that we drop this. Now I'm going to start at 91k. When we test the pedal, if it doesn't clean up with the volume knob on my guitar to get to that violin tone, I'm going to go a bit more aggressive with this and maybe take it down to 80 something, and we'll see. If you wanted to do this, you could just put it on a trim pot if you wanted to, and maybe tweak it that way. It's up to you. But that goes between the second tag along on the top row, if I can ever get it in there, well done, and the third tag along on the bottom row. We're only going to solder the top row because there's something else going in the bottom row there. So a bit of a wet the tip and solder in. Right, now the next part, rather annoyingly, I've cleaned my desk, so don't have any legs to use, any old component legs, and anything that we've snipped off isn't long enough for this next bit, which is frustrating. So what we're going to do is, this is our output cap. It's one of my last 2000 volt Sprague. I messed that up again, haven't I? Future note to Joe, cut this out the video. This is one of my Sprague or Sprague 22 NF caps. It's not what Eric Johnson used, but it is what I'm going to use. All I'm going to do is cut half of the leg off because that'll be long enough for what we need. Save that for later. I'm going to use my component leg. It's going to go between the third tag along on the bottom row and the last tag, the fifth tag along on the top row. Now you are going to be able to solder in both ends of this. So once it's in place, you can solder them in. It is advisable to add some heat shrink to this, or maybe some sheathing off your wire to ground it, so then it's out the way of the future components that we're going to fit. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to struggle along, and when I fit the components in a minute, I'm going to try and work around this thing just for the love of it. Next up, we've got two trim pots to fit. These are to bias both of our transistors. In the regular fuzz face, they are fixed resistors, and in the Eric Johnson fuzz face, you can see they're the ones on the screen now that I am circling. However, I find that if you change them both for 100k, we can, or trim pot, we can refine, if I don't throw them away, we can refine this bias to suit our needs and really dial it in. Especially if you're using an audio probe, which I'm going to use, you can fine tune it to the exact tone that you want. So stick around to the end and you'll get to see how I dial these in. Firstly though, I like to attach component legs to the bottom of these legs on our trim pots, so then they reach far enough to go in the tags. I don't have any component legs, but what I do have is this solid core wire. I've used it plenty of times before, and as said a million times in my videos, you can get this exact wire from the affiliates link in the description. All we're going to do is we need 4 lengths of wire, because we're going to change these trim pots into just variable resistors. I'm going to show you how to do that now. Now, as you can see, our trim pot has three tags on it. So we've got 2 outside. So basically, there's a how it works is there's a carbon track on the inside here. There's 2 tags, one attached to either end of our carbon track. Now, this center tag is known as the wiper, and all that is a connection that touches the carbon track, that when you twist this potentiometer, it either goes towards either one of these pins along the track, changing the resistance. If we clip out that pin and just wire between, just use this tag and this tag, all we're doing is creating a resistor. If you imagine the resistor body sitting between these 2 tags, and all we're doing is increasing or decreasing the resistance between them, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to clip out this leg here, and that's because they're going to sit this way on our board. So if we take out that leg, they naturally sit in the right direction, if you like, and all I do is just snip it off. Don't need to use that, and then that way we've created a variable resistor, and all I do is bend the legs into a loop using my Nipex pliers, Nipex snips, whatever you want to call them. In the Navy they call them side cuts or snips. What the hell? Anyway, we make a loop with them, and then we take our wire and make a loop with that too. I like to call this the hook and loop method. It's not that's not an official thing, but it's definitely what I call it. Marry them together, and then marry them together without throwing it on the floor. Marry them together, and then I pinch the trimmer leg first, and then the wire together, and that kind of locks them in place. Once you get that good mechanical connection, you can then solder it like so. And there, we've got our extended leg on our variable resistor. What I like to do now is add some heat shrink, and then I can make sure that all the legs are the same length. If I cut the heat shrink the same length, I can just bend the leg after the heat shrink, and I know that when I solder it, they're all going to sit the same height. This isn't about building a one-to-one clone of the Eric Johnson Fuzz Face. If that was the case, you could just go and buy the Eric Johnson Fuzz Face, and then you'd have one.
Highly anticipated Eric Johnson Signature Series Fuzz Face.
This is about building a pedal that captures the essence of his tone, using my ears to figure out what's going on with the circuit and bring out the best of it. This video will also show you how you can add this process to any pedal you're building. You can try and tweak any pedal to try and get close to your favourite artist. It's not just about this fuzz, it's about the next 10 pedals you build too. So stay around to the end and you'll get to see all of my tips and tricks on how I get around the little hurdles and the little idiosyncrasies of Eric Johnson's sound. Thought I might as well give the internet another reason to hate on me. So this is how I add heat shrink to my legs on my variable resistors. I cut them all the same length, so then they're going to sit at the same height. I slide the heat shrink over so it covers the part of the leg that we need to be covering, which is the connection, just to hide the solder joint. As we know, my soldering's so terrible, we need to hide it. And then instead of using a heat gun, and I know I should use a heat gun, my wife's bought me one. In fact, she bought one for herself to make these candles with. She never actually got round to starting the full-on candle business. It was just starting to take off, and then she lost interest. Fair enough. And I got the hand-me-down heat gun. I just don't like it, because on board a warship I'd have to store that in a workshop or in my locker. It'd be probably 5 decks away from where I'm working. I never ever, you don't understand how far you'd have to walk to get anywhere on a warship. It's a nightmare. Like up ladders, down ladders, whatever, and then people see you and say, "Oh, Chief, can you just help me with this?" Nah, no chance. What I like to do is just carry this lighter, and as you can see, it's absolutely knackered. It's been round the block. This lighter with me, and then I'll just use the lighter to do the heat shrink. And I know the internet's going to hate it, but I don't care. This is how I do it. And there's no way I could have fitted. Great England, Joe. Well done. There's no way I could have fit a a heat gun in my pocket, in my overalls pocket on board. I just couldn't. And now this is how I do it. I've got a taste for it. Is there anything that you guys do with your pedal builds, like little idiosyncrasies like that you do that you shouldn't do, that you think would be fun for me to have a try at? Please let me know in the comments, and maybe I could incorporate some of your weird techniques in my videos. Alright, so once they're in place, we're going to use these to bias both of our transistors. What I like to do is just bend the legs out. Now, what I've just noticed is, if you can see this, the heat shrink's different sizes on each of them because the leg starts further down on this one. So, absolutely well done, Joe. You messed that up. Doesn't matter. We can get round it. So, the longer leg, I'll bend it out like so, and then I'll bend this one at the same length so that the trim pot sits at the same height. And if we're looking at it this way, it's going to sit in here, but this leg is going to go into a tag that way. So just give that a little tiny bend so it will kind of fit in the direction that we want. Now the base of this, the wiper, the base or whatever, goes into the 4th tag along on the bottom row. Push it as far in as it'll go, and then the other leg goes into the 3rd tag along on the top row. So just hold it up against there, clip the excess off and slide it in. And that's it in place. What we want to do is make sure that we're not fouling our connection that we added in before, our link wire, because we don't want these legs to touch that, otherwise it's going to affect the pedal. Once we've got that in place, all we do is solder the base or the wiper in so it can't move around, and we have, like, you know, a starting point if I can ever get it soldered in there. Well done. Right, then we can manipulate it so then it's sitting upright and straight and flat, and it looks good on the tag board. And now we do the same for this one, because this is going to bias the other transistor. This is the bias for Q2, and again it's going in at an angle, so we make sure that it's, if it's sat straight, this front leg is off to the left, or left as I'm looking at it. The base of this one, or the wiper I should say really, goes into the 5th tag along on the bottom, and then the leg of this goes into the 4th tag along on the top. We're basically just replacing the resistors that supply power, or 9 volts, supply voltage to our transistors. Now, with this bit, you want to get them so they're sitting pretty much side by side. Doesn't have to be exact. And again, we're going to solder in a wiper of our Q2 bias pot. Now they're in place. I'm going to clip off the excess of these legs just to keep them out the way. And now I do have excess leg clippings for any connections that I might need to make. Great. That's what I get for cleaning my desk down, which never happens, by the way. Now we can manipulate them so then they are sat side by side. But look how close that leg is there. I don't know if you can see that. That leg is there to this connection here, which is why I like to heat shrink this normally. But again, as if anyone has watched these videos for a while, you know I like to make life hard for myself, so I haven't done that. What we want to do is maybe move that leg into the tag a bit more and get it out of the way, like so. And then we just make sure that they're sat side by side. Just looks better. Doesn't matter, you could put them anywhere you like really, but it looks better. And now we can solder both of them in. There's no other components going into this side of the tag on either of them. There. I've just got these trim pots, actually, these blue ones. I might order some more. What do you think? Do they look better than the black ones I normally use, or do you think it adds something to it? Anyway, if it looks better, it sounds better. Let's face it. Next up is going to be a resistor. Now, in most fuzz faces, this is a 330 ohm resistor, and it's also the reason why when you step on a fuzz face, it goes really, really quiet. Pointless. If you increase that resistor value up to 1k, it gives you a boost. Like the output of the fuzz face goes way up, and you can go anywhere in between. I've actually gone 1.1k. This is an old Philips resistor. I use them in my Kossoff drives. This is a 1.1k resistor, and the reason why I'm using this is the transistors I'm going to use, even though they're silicon, may need that extra output. I don't know. I'm thinking that to use this pedal to sound like Eric Johnson, you're going to have your volume on your guitar roll back, which means that you're going to want more output on this to make up the difference. That's my thinking anyway. This 1.1k resistor, or 330 ohms if you're building a regular fuzz face, or the Eric Johnson specs one from Dunlop, goes into the last two tags on the bottom row. I like to put the body of the resistor, so I bend it over into this sort of shape. I like to put the body of the resistor going onto the inboard tag, and that's because there's something else going into this outboard one. And I know I'm using Navy terminology again. Take the boy out the Navy, but can't take the Navy out the boy. There you go. So that body of the resistor goes on the fourth tag along, because there's something else going in the fifth tag as well. We can actually solder both legs in now, because we're going to use the outboard tag, like this bit here, to solder our last component in. Right, there we are. And that's pretty much all of the components bar one in. If we just straighten that up. Oh, bar one and our transistors, of course. Now, the output cap is the last component. What I do is, I lie the output cap next, of course with the sprag pointing upwards because it looks cool, next to the board, and wire it in that way. What you could do is have 6 tags and wire it in, going from this tag here to the 6th tag, and then run a wire from it. But I like to use it kind of floating. I don't know why, I just think it looks better. I mean, I would never attempt to do the Marcus Reeves point-to-point stuff, because although it looks amazing, there's an absolute genius skill set to that I don't possess, so I'm not going to do that. But then again, I do like to add the odd floating component just because I think it's fun to do. I love a good floating component. If anyone's ever seen inside an old Magnatone amp, that's like true point-to-point, not like tag board. It's insane. It's just like a snake's wedding of components. It's mad. And I kind of like it. And there must be something to the sound of that, because they all sound good, don't they? So there you go. Anyway, I like to lie it there, and then we can see where we need to bend it to make it sit right next to the board. And then we can get it in, lie it next to the board, and give it a solder. Great. If we tidy that up, there. Now we're ready to go with the transistors. At the heart of every great fuzz pedal is the transistors. And I'm not going to skimp on this one either, but I refuse to use the BC183s that Eric Johnson is known for. Everyone knows to use them, and everyone does use them. So what is special about that? Absolutely nothing. I'm going to show you how to use a random set of transistors, ones that are untested, that no one else has really used before in this context. I'll be showing you how to bias them, and also some little tips and tricks around the transistors that can help you bring the best out of them. Of course, I found some obscure NKT transistors for this pedal, and they're silicon too. Now we're on to potentially the most interesting part of this pedal build. If we take a look at the mark drawing of the Eric Johnson fuzz face, we can see that there's 200 to 600 HFE on Q1, Q2, which is insane to me. And that suggests that Eric Johnson likes the mismatch. But it seems like a hell of a lot of gain to achieve the sound that Eric Johnson is known for. And I'm not too sure where they were going with that. So maybe I'll be wrong and they're right. Or maybe I'm right in saying that I'm going to use something really low gain. I mean lower gain than you have ever used in a fuzz face yourself. Stand by for this one. I'll be using these. It is an NKT 0084. I've never used one of these before. I found them online and I bought every single transistor that they had. Sight unseen, not knowing whether they'll even be usable. These have a really, really low gain range. So they are silicon. They have gold legs, gold pins. And another interesting thing is, when I usually buy a batch of silicon transistors, they usually all test about the same, but not on these ones. They're wildly different. They go between 20 HFE and maybe 40 HFE. It's insane. So as we can see, it says NPN silicon transistor, which it is. gives us our pinout, and the current gain, which is our gain range, the HFE, is 45 for this one. And there is no leakage because it's a NPN germanium, NPN silicon. And the reason why I'm using NPN is so then we can have a negative ground pedal and use a regular power supply. I got asked a few times if I would do a fuzz face with a regular power supply, so I thought, why not? Now, the second transistor, which is again an NKT0084 NPN transistor, gives us our pinout, and this is a gain range of 40 HFE, so even lighter. So we've got 45 and 40. They're pretty close, so it's not the massively mismatched pair that Eric Johnson uses in his signature fuzz face. Now, the thing is, I'm going to put the higher gain 45 HFE in Q1 and the lower gain in Q2. Now, I know that goes against conventional thinking. However, in my mind, how do we set up our pedals? If I'm going to set up gain stages, I'll have something like my higher gain pedal first, then a medium gain, and then a boosty bit at the end, so you don't compress into compress into compress. That's how I think about it. So you're lifting the sound every time. And if we think of these transistors as amplifiers of signal, which they are, maybe the higher gain should go first. Let's find out. Stick around and you'll see what these sound like, and also how I bias them into the circuit. And then again, maybe not, because I don't even know if these are going to bias. There's our first transistor soldered in at one point, so just the base is soldered in, so we can manipulate it round. And our second transistor goes in a different direction. So the pin out of this one, if I get my nice weird screwdriver, the pin out of this one is emitter, base, collector. Okay. However, this transistor, the next one, goes base, collector, emitter. So we have to cross over two legs. Now, this is where the DCA55 comes into its own, because you can use this to find out the pin out of any transistor, even ones that you can't find any information of on the internet, because there's next to no information about these on the net. And if anyone's found any information on them, please let me know. I'd really be interested in reading it. However, using my DCA55, I know that this little tab is telling me that this is the emitter, center is the base, and this side is the collector. Well, I want base, collector, emitter, so I'm going to have to swap these two legs over. And all I do is just bend them into place so they're swapped over. Simple as that, he says. Now, I put heat shrink or some wire sheathing on this center leg just to stop these two from touching each other. You don't have to. If you bend them out the way of each other, that's fine. But then again, if you look at pedals like from differential audio manifestation, DAM, they cover all of their legs and sheathe them, and he's awesome, so maybe you should cover their legs. What I like to do, I just do the one, is I just take a little bit of my my wire cover, because I use that silicone wire, it comes off real easy, and then I'll just measure it against the transistor that I've already fitted in and snip it to that length, and that way I know that this will sit at the same distance from the board, which is handy, or there or thereabouts. And this one goes in with the base going into the same leg as the collector on Q1, the collector going into the second from end tab, which is the fourth one along, and then the emitter going into the last tab, if I never squeeze it in there. And then all we have to do is make sure that they're sat at the same distance from the boards as each other. I mean, you don't have to, that's absolutely lying there. You don't have to do this. This is what I like to do. I make them sit at the same distance from the board on both sides, and I solder in the center leg, which in this case is the collector, but usually it'd be the base. Now they're sat side by side. I can manipulate them so they are straight to each other, and now I'll just go ahead and solder all of them other legs in place. What I like to do is solder one leg on Q, if I can ever get a bit of solder on my iron, one leg on Q1, and then move to one leg on Q2, and then that way they both get a break in between. Then I like to clean my iron to let the work cool down, and then I'll solder the center pin where the two transistors meet. This is more prevalent on germanium transistors. Silicon transistors seem less affected by heat than their germanium counterparts, which is why industry moved away from germanium and ultimately it's become obsolete. There we go. Here's all the hardware I'm going to be using. We've got our 500k pot and our 1k pot, which is our volume and fuzz. DC jack, I like these barrel jacks. I've used a lot of red ones lately, but I do think red is going to suit this enclosure. LED bezel, anodized red, because I do think that that'll suit the enclosure again. Regular input and output jacks. Notice that there is no switched input on this one, and that's because we're using the regular power supply, no battery, no messing about. And then our gold pin 3-pole double throw switch. Again, these are soft touch compared to the regular 3-pole double throw switches. I like them. I'm going to go ahead and get it populated now. So here's our hardware on our enclosure, ready to go. And we're going to fit our tag board in here like so. I like to run the wires in one wiring loom, as everyone knows who watches this show by now. And the best way to do that is to position this tag board, although it looks unsightly, off to the side. If I position it off to the side like that, that means that I have all this space here to run our wires down. And this cap is going to connect over here, so it kind of lines up and it's out the way of the LED, and that's where I'm going to go ahead and fit it. Now normally I like to off-center the foot switch and add in a power filter section to get rid of any noise or what have you from the power supply. I'm not going to do that on this pedal, mainly because I want this to be a beginner fuzz pedal build. If you're building your first fuzz pedal, I want you to build this one. So I'm not going to add the power filter in. However, any of you tone hounds out there who want to add the power filter, I'm either more than happy to send you a drawing of it, or conversely, watch one of my other videos. I've done it 1,000 times before. You'll be able to figure it out from there. I'm going to get this attached to the pedal, and then we'll get onto the wiring. There we are, good to go, ready to start wiring our pedal up. And I'm going to start left to right on this bottom row. I know we normally start on the top row, but the first tag in the top row is going to be the ground, and that's the most wiring I'm going to do. It's quite a big ground loop, so I'm not going to bother with that. I'll do that in a minute. So this bottom side of our 15 microfarad cap is going to run round and go to the center tag, the wiper of our fuzz pot, which is here. Now to run this, I'm going to run it out the back of this tag here, and the shortest route would be to go round here and straight to there. But I'm not going to do that, because all of my wires are going to come round this way. They're going to come up in this space here that I've created. So I'm going to come down to this back bulkhead, wall, edge, whatever. On board ships we call the wall a bulkhead. Can't help it. We come down to this back bulkhead, run along up here, and that wiring loom is going to then go round and go to these bits. But I'm also going to take a leg off, which is going to go to here and round here to these. So we're going to come round in a big loop and go to there. Now I know that technically this is going to sound worse. People would say the shortest route is best. You know, there's less wire, less capacitance, less inductance and all that stuff, and mainly capacitance with a wire. The longer the wire you're using, say like for the guitar lead, the more capacitance you're going to have, which means that you're going to have more tone suck technically. Now I think the levels we're talking about in here are negligible. I don't think it matters, or if it does matter, I can't hear a difference. And because I'm so vain and obsessed with how the inside of these look, I want it to look good, so I'm going to do it this way. So it's going to run up here. It's going to run round and under our transistors. Now remember, we don't actually know if these transistors are A, going to work, or B, going to sound any good if they do work. So we'll take them with a pinch of salt when they come. We may be swapping them out. I can never get this in there. And this is going into the center wiper or center tag of our fuzz pot. If I can ever get this wire to situate properly.
5 hours later.
There, that should roughly do it. Rough it in for the first couple of wires, and then they start building up on top of each other, like kind of hold each other in place. I I will be showing this wire for wire. I know I normally skip a few wires out and just move on and say I'm going to attach it here and attach it, but I'll try and show this wire for wire, just in case there are any beginners that are doing this as their first build. So regular viewers, of course, I do label the chapters, so if you want to skip past any of the wiring, then you can do that. Of course, it's better for me and the dreaded YouTube algorithm if you watch the whole thing, of course. So there's our first wire now in place. Just take the end of that off. What's next? The next pin along, which goes to our 1 microfarad cap, is going straight to our input. So I'm going to leave that. In a minute I'm going to show you a little bit of trickery that's going to help tame this circuit to be a bit more Eric Johnson, violin tony, lack of words to describe it. So I'm going to leave that now and move to the next pin along, where our 91k resistor goes into, and I'm going to follow the same wire and loom and go right the way along, and this is going to go to pin number 3, or tag number 3 on our fuzz pot right here. There's our first 2 wires in place, coming from the first tag and the third tag on our tag board. The next tag along, this is going to follow the same wire and loom, come round, and it's going to come up through here and go to our DC jack. What I will do is I'll strip one end longer and I'll show you how I attach it to the DC jack. Anyway, so to attach, I might as well do that now. I'll do that first. So to attach it to the DC jack, I take a longer strip of wire than I need. Then I tin it. And for the beginners there that are watching, when I say tin it, all that means is basically solder this wire. So then all the strands join together as one big solid wire. Makes it easier to work with when you're poking it through holes, and it also means that when you start soldering it, it adheres, the solder adheres to the work much easier. So I'll put that through the bottom tag on our DC jack, and then I'm going to run it round and rest it underneath the bottom tag, so you have this. You can see that. Now the reason being is I'm going to solder that bottom tag in. This is the tag that actually carries power when you have a DC jack plugged in, is that bottom one. I'll solder that in place because that's where our power is going to come from. But because we're not using a battery, what I'm going to do is I'm going to solder this extra length. If I clip the excess off, I'll solder this extra length to the other tag, and that tag there is for when you have a battery in the pedal as well. So if we were to plug in a jack to this, it disconnects the battery connection, so you don't have to remove the battery, or you're not putting too much voltage through the pedal. It disconnects that and then just uses the mains power, if you like. But because we're not using that, I'm going to use that as an extra tag to run my current limiting resistor, and all that is a resistor that goes to the positive side of our LED. I'll just use that as a staging ground for it. But because I'm not fitting that until much later on, at this moment in time I just leave it like that, with the center tag unsoldered, bottom tag carries our 9-volt wire. Now this is important. I've got a decision to make. I can either run this wire down the side of this pot, follow this wire and loom as we've got it. That would mean that the input and output jacks do the same thing up here, and same with the wiring for this. It would come up here and then go round to it. And I think that's what I'm going to do, but normally I would go along the back bulkhead, wall, whatever, drop down, so then when it's coming up this way, this would go to here. But I'm going to go this way round this time. Again, the way that you route your wires, I think, really makes a difference in sound. But if nothing else, it sort of becomes your signature as a builder. So if you're planning on doing this more than just building yourself one, it's worth thinking about this stuff early on, because, you know, once you've done something, you kind of lump with it. Well, you know, you can do whatever you like, but it's what you become known for, if you like. Now, that's going to come right the way around, follow the same wire and loom, and yes, I know there's more wire here than is necessary, and it's kind of a waste running it this big long way. I don't care. And it's going to go round to the fourth pin along, which is the bottom of our 1.1k resistor. or in your case anywhere between 330 ohms and 1.1k. It's completely up to you how much voltage you want. You could even add a pot there, dare I say, and you could adjust that, have it on the outside, and have, you know, you could adjust kind of like the output of the pedal from there as well as the volume. Add another dimension to it. Maybe I'll do that one day if anyone's interested, to like the most mods to a Fuzz Face. And before someone says it, I know that's what ZVEX did for the Fuzz Factory, and that's how we got that. Okay. Well, at least I think that's how we got that. I'm sure someone in the comments is going to tell me I'm wrong there. Right, so I'll just tuck that wire away and make sure that it's all running in the same direction. So when we come and put our 7,000 unnecessary cable ties in, cheers Glyn, they all stick together. There. That's our 9 volt. Well, that's not sticking there very well, is it? There's our 9 volt put in. What's next? Well, next you would think would be this cap here that goes over to this pot, but I'm going to put that in last because I'm running wires around here. Don't want to mess with it. So we finished our bottom row here. Next we're going to go onto the top row, and the only connection on the top row is a ground connection going into here. Now our ground on our jack is this top one here with the little like extra piece. It's a center negative, and that runs to the center of our socket. So where are we going to connect? Well, I like to connect the grounds off our 2 jacks, even though I know that they're grounded to the circuit, which is grounded to the back of the pots, which all runs off one of these ground tabs. So you don't really need to solder all of them in. I'm going to anyway. I'm going to run a solid core wire over the top of these 2 to connect into this jack socket here. And then I'm also going to run a wire that comes down, or maybe even 3 wires that come down. One's going to attach to this pot, pin 1. One's going to attach to this pot, pin 1. I'm also going to need to attach the aforementioned tag on our NKT0084 here. And I'm also going to have to run a wire right the way around here to go to the center pin of our 3-pole double throw switch. And that's going to be used to turn on and off our LED. Now we're going to move on to our input. But before we do, let's just go through what we did. I added in this solid core copper wire going from our 9 volt DC jack across the top of our 2 input and output jacks. Then I attached 4 wires coming from this copper wire, one going to pin 3 of each of our pots, one coming round to the emitter of our Q1, and another one's come all the way round and gone to the center pin of our 3-pole double throw switch, and that is of course to operate our LED. Now we're going to move on to our input. So the input to our circuit comes from this forward left pin here. This is the input. It's going to attach to this cap here, and I'm going to attach it, instead of a wire, by this resistor here. Now on the Analog Man Fuzz Face pedals, the Sunface, he uses like a 50k potentiometer to create like an input, sort of like you're rolling your guitar's volume off, but instead of it going to ground like with your volume pot, it's just resistance in the way. Well, I'm going to do something similar and add in, oh no I'm not, ha! Well, I thought this was 50 ohms, it's actually 50k. I want a 50 ohm resistor that I'm going to add in from here to here, just to give a little bit, not as if it's like any resistance in a way, just a little bit of separation between the outside world and this cap. Back to the drawing board to find a component though. Okay, take 2. I'm going to be using this resistor, which is a high precision resistor. They're rather expensive and unnecessary for what I'm using it for, before someone else gets in there first and tells me. This is a 760 ohm resistor. So it's basically nothing, but this is what I'm going to use, and it's going to go between the input of our circuit and our switch. So how am I going to do that? Well, it's going to just run straight from this tag down here up to this pin here, but I'm not going to snip it there. I am indeed going to do the little thing that I learnt off Marcus Reeves lately, and that is I'm going to leave the resistor leg along this side, and I'm going to let it run straight the way through to this tag here in the center at the back. And that's because when the pedal is in the off position, it will attach our ground connection here straight to it, which means that the input of our circuit will be attached to ground when the pedal is off. That means there'll be no noise coming from the circuit to affect anything while the pedal is off. Fantastic. I can't believe I haven't been doing that the whole time. I almost feel stupid for not figuring that out myself. So cheers, Marcus. Yeah, so to fit that in there, I'm just going to slide it in and manipulate it best I can. Try not to touch anything else while I'm doing it. Like so. And then we'll just solder that in place. These gold pins on these 3-pole double throw switches are so easy to solder to. So for all of my UK viewers, over in America they have this site called Love My Switches. Love My Switches, I think that's what it's called. And they sell like every different type of stomp you can imagine. Like different colours, different materials. It's fantastic. Right. Let me solder that in there, and that's our input sorted out. Now while we're on the subject of input and output, our next wire going in is going to be this front tag on the opposite side, and that's the output of our circuit coming back to the stomp switch, which will eventually go out the output jack. And that comes from this here, from the wiper of our volume pot. And I'm going to run a wire down this wiring loom, round the back and up the ponytail, and up into this position here. There's our wire now attached from the wiper of this pot round and then up through our ponytail to here. While we're soldering this pot, we might as well go ahead and put the negative side of our LED, the bit that's going to get switched in, and that's going to come from this center tag here, round the same wiring loom up and then to the shorter leg of our LED. So our LED negative side now wired in. Next up is going to be the actual signal path of our pedal. So our input jack is on the left because the pedal's upside down, remember that? Our input jack coming from this tag here, round, up through the ponytail and to the left hand side of our 3-pole double throw switch. And then the same again with the output jack. It's going to come round the back here, follow the wiring loom still, and go into the right hand side of our input jack. I'll also add in the link wire that carries the bypass signal when the pedal's off. And we are cooking with gas. There's our link wire put in. Our input and our output jacks are now wired up. Last two things to do. First is this floating resistor here needs to attach to pin 3 of our volume pot. And then, if you remember that tag that we didn't solder before on the DC jack, that needs to be soldered to a resistor going to our positive side of our LED. Now the question is, how bright do you want your LED? If you want it super bright, 1K, 1.5K will get you there, blinding. Or you want it quite, dull, or it's not really dull, is it? But a lower key, anything up to 10K is going to be good for that. I'm going to go with a 10K, and I'll get all that soldered in, and we can move on to biasing these transistors. For me, this is the most important part of this pedal build. It goes without saying that biasing your transistors makes the most difference to the tone. And it's what separates the not so good transistors, or the not so good builders I should say, from the really good builders. And I'm not considering myself as a really good builder. Before anyone says that, I'm just stating a fact. Now, we're going to attach our black lead to the ground bus because this is a negative ground pedal. We'll go to volts DC on our DCA on our Fluke 101, and then we'll take our positive lead and we'll touch it to the collector of Q1. Now that's reading 1.6. I want that to read about 1.3 as a start for silicon, or 0.7 for germanium, because this works for germanium too. So 1.68, and then we go to the collector of Q2. Now I'm aiming for 4.5 volts on this, whether it's germanium or silicon. The thing is, these two transistors are interactive. So if I adjust the bias on one, it affects the bias on the other. Now Q1's bias really affects Q2 quite a bit. Certainly more than Q2 affects Q1, but there is a change. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to dial back Q1 just a little bit to get it back to 0.3, as that one affects the other one more. And look at that. I can't actually get it any lower than 0.6. Sorry, 1.6. So I'm going to have a snag here. Let me see what adjusting this down to 4.5 does for our Q1. There you go, 4.7. We'll see what it looks like from there. Now that's at 1.68. That is actually no good for us. So let me get prepped and I'll show you another little trick that you can use to help bias this transistor. Now, of course, you could just change the transistors, and we may end up having to do that. I did say that in the beginning. I may have been completely wrong, but let me show you another trick. Okay, so if we remember, we're on 1.6 volts and we want to get it down to about 1.3 to start. What I have here is a 100k potentiometer with 2 wires attached to it. So as I adjust this potentiometer, so one attached to the center wiper and one attached to one of the outside wipers, doesn't matter which one, as I adjust the potentiometer, it's going to adjust the resistance between these 2 wires, and it's just going to act like a resistor basically. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to attach one end to ground, like so, and one end I'm just going to loop round, hook round our collector, which we're currently working on. If I can get it in there. This would be much easier if I had like proper whatever. So you can see that's dropped down now to 1.6. Now if I move this potentiometer, I can adjust the value here, and I'll bring that down to 1.3, there or thereabouts. Now I can go ahead and check the collector on our Q2 is shot up. So what I want to do is I want to adjust the collector on our Q2. It's going to be really hard to keep these attached while I'm doing it. So if I attach that to collector on Q2 and this back on here. I mean, you could solder a trim pot in place for this if that's what you want to do, and then that way it'll just stay in there. However, if I touch Q2 now, we are at, should be at 6 volts. Yeah, 6.5 volts. So what I'll do is I'll dial that back a little bit. See where we're at. Oh, that was way too much then. Little tiny adjustments on this because it's a 100k pot. A little goes a long way. I could have changed that to a 50k or what have you, but I use 100k because I want both the pots to look the same. You don't have to, of course. So that's a 4.5 volts, and that has done what to our other transistors? Put up to 1.6. So what we need to do now is adjust this again. So we come back over here to this one to balance and act. And that's why these things are so expensive, because you're paying for someone to balance these transistors out. Right, so that is at 1.296, which really is close enough for government work. If we go back to Q2, we've got 4.5. Right, so this is important. Let's not knock this in any way. Let's take our two wires off. And now what we want to do is we want to test the resistance between these two wires, and that'll tell us what resistor we need to add in to get this to bias properly. So there's one lead, and where's my other lead? Still attached to the bloody pedal. Well done, Joe. 10 out of 10 for perception. Right. So that's telling me that if I add a 2.2k resistor in, that'll from our Q1 collector to ground, that'll give us the right voltage that we want. Okay, so we've got it connected up now, ready for just a little sound sample to see if these transistors are going to work. I have no clue if they're going to work, and I will use my my Strat for the proper demo, but for this I'm just using this, which is my 1960 Melody Maker. It's what I test and develop all my pedals with, because it's like my guitar, if you like. So this is the clean tone. I'm using the Bridge P90, which is a Sunbear P90. He made me an awesome set. There you go, so there's that, and we've got the gain, the fuzz and the volume right the way up, and then this is the tone of it. Right, okay, so these pickups are definitely more gainy than a Strat pickup, and they're not really I'm not getting the output and the woomph and the push that I expected to get that Eric Johnson sound, which is probably why he's using higher gain transistors that put out loads and then dial them back. Now we've got two options for this. Our first option could be to change out the Q1 transistor and give it a bit more gain. Maybe put something in like a BC182L in there. Or we could change them both for the actual set that Eric Johnson uses, which is BC183s, and go for a 200 HFE and a 600 HFE, like in his thing, like Dunlop do. But I don't want to copy them, so I want to do my own thing. Another thing we can do is a little trick with the output cap. So if I turn this on and turn it over, apologies for all the pops and squeaks you're going to get because I'm banging my guitar on everything. Fantastic. If I turn it over, right now our output cap is coming from here, which is where it comes from on all fuzz faces. But if we were going to like change that and take it directly from the collector, the collector of Q2. So if I attach, I'm playing this one-handed by the way, so please forgive me. This is without the extra cap in. But if we were to take our output from the collector of Q2, I don't know if you can hear that, but there's a massive change there in the bite and the output and stuff, and that's because we haven't got this resistor in place in the circuit. We have really, because we're using both the Sprague output cap and this ITT cap to give it more bite. Now the question is, do I think that that's going to be better or worse than changing the transistors from these silicon NKT transistors? I don't know. I genuinely don't know. So what I'm going to do is I'm probably going to solder this in place, have a little play. There's our pedal now back to normal. I have removed Q2. So our second NKT 0084 is now removed. This is my thinking. If we look at the Eric Johnson pedal, it has a 250-ish HFE in Q1 and a 600 in Q2. That means that it's like 3 times bigger in Q2 than Q1. And if that's the tone he likes, fine. But I'm determined to use these NKT 0084 transistors, at least one of them. So what I am going to do is I'm going to try this. This is a ACU board from a Type 23 frigate. If anyone's watching from the military, this had been in the bin, in the rubbish, in the trash for my American friends. It had burnt out, it's broke, but the tantalum caps, and more importantly, all of these transistors are all still usually good. Now, I'm going to pick this one here because it's close to the edge, and the top of it looks like it's been aged quite a bit by the years at sea it's spent with me. These are actually 2N1711 transistors. So I'm going to take one of these out now, and we'll test it. But I think these are usually around 80 HFE. Certainly on some of the other boards that I've reclaimed them from, I get the BFX 85s. They're about 80 HFE, which would be ideal. And sometimes these boards can come with either them BFX 85s or these. So let's have a look. They come with these cool little standoffs, which I'm obviously not going to use. Look at that, reclaiming parts live on a show. Well, not live because it's recorded, but while I'm filming a show, love it. So whoever buys this one potentially could have a little bit of my military history in here on their pedal board. So this is telling us that it is a NPN silicon transistor, yes. Gives us our pinout, and it's actually 150 HFE. So that's 3 times bigger than our 45 HFE Q1, which is about the same as what is it meant to be, or is what it's telling us. So I'm going to go ahead and fix that in now into this position here. I was just about to use the hook and loop method to attach some of my my uncoated wire to the bottom of this transistor to make the legs longer, and I remembered I'd seen something amazing recently. It was, of course, my mate Hubcap John. If people don't follow him, people haven't bought any of his pedals, go and check him out because he's awesome. He recently had an Instagram post showing how to extend these transistor legs by using this. It's just a little bit of Vero board, and all he does is attach the transistor to the Vero board or solder it in like that, solder them 3 legs, and then after that attach your extension wire to the bottom of the Vero board, and there we have it, our mini little board with our transistor legs coming off the end. It's got our military spec 2N1711 transistor on there. I think that's cool. I mean, awesome or what? Anyway, now we're going to move on to soldering that in place. The thing is, our center leg is going to need to have some insulation on it because of the pin out of our transistor. We're going to need to cross over some legs. So just to be on the safe side, I mean, I'm pretty sure the tab is telling me that that is the emitter, but rather than guessing, let's just double check because, you know, it's nothing worse than soldering something in place and then having to take it out again because you put it in the wrong way round. And as we have our DCA 55 right here, we might as well just use it. NPN silicon, collector base emitter. Oh, it is 150. I went right past it. Red is the collector, green is the base, and blue is indeed the emitter with the little tab on. That's perfect. So it's going to go in this way round, and these 2 legs are going to cross over like so. So what I'm going to need to do is put some extra sheathing onto the center leg, which is our collector here. I'm still a little bit bummed about taking that NKT transistor out. It really did sound good. It was like a low gain silicon fuzz that could almost have passed off as germanium in its tone. But you know, it's not what this video is about, I suppose. So then if we cut all of our legs level, I mean, that's going to be pretty long. That's probably a bit too long, isn't it? Cut them level a bit lower down. There we go. It's going to go in this way round. So let's get this. I'm going to solder the emitter in there first. All I'm going to do is just heat up the tag because it has got soldered in there. What I should do is use a solder sucker and get that solder out the way. But as you guys know, I hate solder suckers. If that's even what they're called. I think it's called a solder pump, isn't there? Something like that. There it is, in place, ready to go. I think it looks awesome. Now let's have a go at biasing it. So we're going to go onto volts DC. We're going to put our black lead, which is our negative side, onto anywhere that's a negative point on the pedal. I'm going to use that rail that I put in at the top. And if we look at our Q1 collector, we are getting no voltage. And that's because, helps if you plug it in, Joe. Well done. It's been a long day. So our Q1, we're now getting 1.55. And our Q2 is giving us 3.4. So if we increase our Q2, it will lower Q1 because they're interactive, and hopefully it'll just fit in nicely. So let's increase it. Oh, looks like it's going to be a real knife edge fine tune here. That's not great. I may have to have a fiddle with the value of this potentiometer to try and get it up there. Right, 4.2. That's as close as I'm going to get it for now, and then we'll try our Q1 again, see where we are. Helps if you connect it on. 4.5. Right, if I'm going to shed it, I can't shed on a Q1 because of the way that it's set up. Brilliant. So if we increase this, our Q2, and just watch Q1, that should go down with the increase of Q2. which it does. So 1.35, and it's still moving around a little bit, but 1.35 on Q1. Q2's collector is at 5.4. Right, now that's a little bit high. I normally try and get it to 4.5 and then do it by ear. But you know what? I'm just going to give that a go and see where we are. It's time for that part of the show again. What knobs should I choose? Well, we've got all of our circuit wired up. It's looking good with our military spec transistor in there and stuff. And now it's the final bit to set the pedal off. Now I've used these recently in a few builds. These are the old Big Muff style Soviet whatever knobs. To me, they look a little bit close together on this particular pedal format. I've drilled the pots a little bit further in than normal. I'm not sure I like that. I don't know what you guys think of that. And then, of course, we've got our Neve style maroon knobs. I really like these. I recently took a pedal to Joe from the gig rig. We've been working on something, and are still working on something. It literally sounds terrible for bass, which is terrible when you're making a bass guitar pedal. But I put these knobs on it because I knew he'd like them, and he did, which is fantastic. I'm not sure they go with this. I think white goes better with this format. Yeah, I'm just not sure they go with it. And then, tried and trusted, old favourite of mine, the cupcake knobs. I like these the best. However, it's up to the buyer to decide what they like. I'd like to know in the comments which ones you would choose, and most of all, tell me why. Why would you choose the specific set that you've chose? And now it's the bit that you've all been waiting for. It is, of course, the sound sample. I want to know what you think of my choice of transistors, and also I want to know what you think of the sounds that I get with this pedal. I will, of course, be using my Strat for this bit, and as most of you know, I hate playing my Strat. It just feels awkward, clunky, it's in the way. Although I love the look of it, and I do love the sound of a Strat before the internet absolutely crucifies me. I do like a Strat, but it doesn't fit my body type. I'm too short and fat to be able to get the scale length. It just doesn't work. However, I'd like to know what you think of this pedal. Thank you for coming on this tone chasing quest with me. If you enjoyed this video, please do like and subscribe. It really does help the channel. And also, if you like this video, you're going to love this video where I build a Range Master.